Hi, welcome to Pearls of Motherhood. I'm your host, Tessie. Today's episode is a deeply personal one. It's about resilience, the courage to keep going, even when it feels like everything is stacked against you, and ultimately the miraculous outcome that came after years of heartache. Our host, Diana, is opening up about their IVF journey. After 13 years of trying to become a mom, battling infertility, and navigating the world of medical treatments, there was finally hope, but not without immense struggle. So in this episode, we'll hear how Diana faced not only infertility, but also an endometriosis diagnosis, the challenges of the pandemic, and the emotional weight of it all. If you're in the middle of your own IVF journey or struggling with infertility, this episode is definitely for you. And we hope it brings you strength, comfort, and a reminder that you're not alone. So, disclaimer, before we begin, we want to let you know that this episode includes a sensitive conversation about infertility, IVF, and reproductive health. While we won't be graphic, we do discuss human anatomy and medical procedures. This is a deeply personal story shared for the first time since experiencing it. Please listen with care, especially if you're in a tender place or listening with little ones nearby. So, Diana, thank you so much for opening up about this. I feel like this is going to be so
I'm nervous.
Helpful. Yeah, no, I think this is awesome that you're willing to do this.
At first I wasn't willing to when I was first going through this, like, oh my gosh, I have to play this so close to the chest and everything because I was embarrassed. But as I went through the journey and I included everyone in my life, even strangers, honestly, I found a community. And when you and I came up with the idea of starting this podcast, I thought, well, this is something that I think should be shared. And if it doesn't help everyone, maybe it helps one person and that'll totally be worth it. But I am totally nervous because this is the first time I'm reliving this ever since going through it.
Yeah. And you know what? So many people I know are struggling with like infertility or especially endometriosis. Like, what is up with that?
Yeah. 1 in 10 women have endometriosis.
That's insane. Yeah. And it's like, well, you can explain more about how it affects you because I don't know. So this is going to be really actually eye-opening for me, this whole, because I don't know, what it's like to go through it. And that's what's also really cool about you opening up is like people who haven't experienced it or who just have no clue what it's like can get a better understanding.
Yeah. When I opened up about the whole thing, when I was going through it, I talked to so many women who are already moms and they have endometriosis, but it presented in a different way for them. So they didn't have fertility issues. They just had a lot of pain or it was diagnosed after they had their children. So there's a huge spectrum of how the disease presents. It's very interesting. And there's a lot more studies going on because it's not it's understood, but not super well understood. Like there's no cure for it yet. We only have ways to kind of circumvent everything and put everything on hold so we can do what we need to do. It's like a Band-Aid rather than a cure. So there's still a lot to be learned.
I don't even know what to say. Why don't we just start with, why don't you take us back? Can you take us to the early days? Like when did you first know something wasn't quite right?
So my husband and I, we were married at like about not even a year and we knew something was wrong. Everyone after your wedding, the next question is, when are you going to have a baby? Right. And we played it off with, we're still in school because we were still students and had a huge amount of student debt, like insane amounts. So we're like, oh, the timing's not right yet. Or, oh, we're just trying to, enjoy married life. But after a year of actually trying, and I went off birth control, things weren't happening. And at that point, I kind of realized, hey, something is wrong, but what is it? Is it the stress of school? Is it financial stress? Is it infertility? And whose fault is it? Quote unquote, whose fault is really no one's fault. But there were a lot of questions. So it was early on that we knew. I won't lie when I say that I went the crazy route a little bit. Like, I went to extreme measures. I even stopped my husband from using a heated blanket for a while because I was like, "You're cooking my babies." Like, that's bananas. Although he does have something to do with it, but I went that far. I was like, "No, you cannot sleep in comfort because I need to have a baby."
I was that crazy too.
Yay, I'm not alone. So it was early on that we knew, and we just kept on, we put on happy faces and we just kept on going through our lives and just try to be normal or to put a happy face out there for everyone. But inside we were really like, oh, what is going on? And at the same time, we knew my maternal clock was ticking. Because I wasn't older when I got married, but I was in my late 20s when I got married. So a lot of my friends already had kids who were 4 or 5 or 6. So there was pressure.
So what was it like to keep trying for so many years and no answers? Like, you had no idea what to do, what was going on?
It was disappointing. Very disappointing. Every time I had a late period, it's like that hope. And I was super regular. So I would read into it. Like, let's say I was like an hour late from last month. I'd go, oh, and then I would get disappointed. I think I kept the pregnancy test industry in business myself. It was also scary because I didn't know if something was really wrong with one of us or both of us. Like, is it cancer? Is there a mass growing in there that shouldn't be there? Because we couldn't afford professional help. And the unknown is scary. But at the same time, it was strangely comforting because it just became something that came every month. Like, oh yeah, after a while you become numb to the disappointment. You're just like, oh yeah, that's about right. So it was a roller coaster and also pressure because my clock is ticking, quote unquote.
You didn't actually seek any medical, try to like see what was wrong for how long? How long did that go on?
13 years because we couldn't afford. Yeah. They told us, oh, all my OBs, they were telling me, okay, do you want to have kids? Because you need to get on it. Everyone kept on pushing because I was getting older. I'm not getting younger. And we do have biological clocks and my ideal window was closing. So, but we couldn't afford it because we were students. We had no health care, or even if I did have health care, it was a high deductible, a high premium, and all of my bills, my day-to-day livings went to food, clothing, and paying student loans. So any small hiccup that came our way, we couldn't afford it. So yeah, we waited 13 years. It wasn't until I moved to Arizona and I met you, Tessie, that was when we finally sought help because we were financially stable enough to do that, to prioritize that.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, were there moments when you thought you might give up, or did you ever feel like so discouraged that you just thought it was never going to happen?
I did think that. I think that a lot of women think that. I would be lying if I told you that, oh no, I always had hope. No, I did not. But I always invested in a plan B, which was, okay, we're going to adopt. And we always thought adoption was in the picture for us. Even if I had my own children, my own biological kids, we always thought that we would adopt in the future. And it still may be an option now, but right now we're just focusing on getting through toddlerhood. So we always had a plan B because we knew that was a possibility that I may never have my own children, our own children.
You know, I can relate to wanting to like adopt, you know what I mean? Like I kind of had that all thought in back of my mind. Like, if you never know, if I could never have babies, what would I do? I always would think that, you know, and I would totally be open to adoption too.
Yeah, because there's so many kids out there who could use a good home, and we always wanted to provide a good home to any children, to any child who came across
Mhm.
our way. So that was our plan B. If we couldn't have our own, then we would adopt, and that's okay too.
So how would you know that that was the right direction? You know what I mean? Like versus continuing to try. Did you ever think about that?
Yeah, so we talked about it and we said we would pursue IVF, aggressively pursue IVF, do everything we could, max out every possibility via IVF first, and then go to adoption. We did talk about for a brief while, oh, let's have it overlap a little bit because the adoption process is a very long process and my fertility window was closing. But at the time when I embraced IVF, we said we're going to do everything we could just as we agreed. And if this doesn't work, we'll go to plan B. We agreed that we would do 2 rounds of IVF at most. Since I was so much older, there was no sense in trying when my probability was getting smaller and smaller, when we can have a family
Yeah.
another way.
Yeah. So let's just set the stage. Like, how old were you when you started that journey?
So I was, how old was I? Let me see. That's a really good question. I was
38, 39?
38. I was 38.
38. Okay.
I was 38 when I started, 39 when COVID hit, 40 when I got pregnant, and 41 when I gave birth.
Wow. So 4 years for you. And
Mm-hmm.
from somebody who's never had to even, like, thank God, haven't had to go through that, how do you even begin that process? Like, how do you pick the doctor? How do you know the right thing, like clinic to go to? Like, how, you know what I mean? Like, how do you navigate all of that? Like, how did you decide where you wanted to go or who you trusted?
That's a really good question. I am a researcher. I read everything. I read every article, even if it's like buying like cotton swabs. I go and research like the best cotton swabs I could get for my money because that's what I do. And it may take me forever to buy a cotton swab, but once I buy it, it's like for life. So that's the kind of person I am. So when I moved to Arizona, our biggest city is Phoenix. That's closest to us. And I started just researching, just lightly looking at IVF clinics, knowing that in the back of my head, this is probably around the time that we would most likely do this. And I came across this one doctor and they called him the baby whisperer. And I went on Google reviews. I went on ZocDoc. I even did Reddit. I mean, I did really every nook and cranny I could think of. And I encourage all women to do that. Know who you're going to and know what you're getting into, because this is a very personal journey. You're going to feel incredibly vulnerable and you want to have the right medical support with you.
Yeah, no, I'm going to have you research my plastic surgeon when I'm done having babies.
Oh, I
I'll
know
let you
those
pick
too.
him.
See, I already did the research in Phoenix for that, baby.
Yes. I love your OCD type A personality. I love it.
About it too. I was like, okay, I'm going to need this. And Phoenix is right there. So yes, I already did my research. I'm good. I'll send over my documents.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So for you, when you finally did decide to do IVF, like, had you ever had any like experience with like getting pregnant but losing it, or was it just like never happening? Like, what happened in that journey?
I did get pregnant several times. I think I lost 4 or 5 because they were early on, and like they were, I don't think I ever got past my first trimester. But like I said, I was always pretty regular, so I could kind of depend on that. But then again, I was late here and there, and I may have lost more. I just didn't know it because it turns out, and I'll talk more about this later, was that I have endometriosis. So my uterine lining that the embryo would attach to was very, very spotty. There was nothing for it to attach to. So I may have conceived many times before, but there was just no implantation.
Wow. Okay, so then now you've made your decision. You're ready to you did your research and you're ready to take this next step. Like, can you just explain that? What was that like?
So at this point, I had my dream job in Arizona. I was running a rural medicine clinic, family medicine in rural Arizona, and my boss and I were trying to build up his practice. That's something I had dreamed of my whole life, and I finally got it. And I got pregnant and I lost another one, and it was a very hard time at work, and a flip just kind of switched in my head, and I said, I'm done. I had no passion for what I did anymore in my job, and I knew at that point that I would not be of any use to anyone in that office, because it is a high pressure office. We saw patients from birth to death. We saw the whole gamut of population. So I had to have passion for what I did and to get my team to be empathetic and excited for what they do every day. And I knew I didn't have that anymore. So at that point, I walked away. I quit my dream job and decided, hey, I'm going to focus on my family. It was also really hard because I was working long hours, and I saw, like I said, we saw every age group, including pregnant women of all different ages, from teenagers all the way up to quote unquote geriatric pregnancies. So we saw the whole gamut of them. And there were a lot of women who didn't want their pregnancies. And that made me really angry, resentful, even, like, what is wrong with me? Why can't that be me? If I were pregnant, I would be so happy. And here I am trying to fight for this. So that had a huge part in my decision to walk away, because it was getting too personal. I couldn't do what I needed for our patients and for our office, because I couldn't make clear choices and good decisions at that point.
Yeah, and I feel like your decision to actually move on from that was almost like a paradigm switch. Like, that was your whole life, and the decision to actually make the appointment and take that leap of faith, what did that feel like?
Liberating, honestly. It was.
Yeah.
So, like you said, before all this, my career was my baby. That was everything. I even thought that I would get pregnant and then work through it all, and then I'd pop out a baby and then go back to work. And as you all know, that didn't happen.
I remember that too.
Yes, you do. You're the one who told me, no, I think you're gonna want to stay home. And I was like, we'll see. And Tessie is right. So it was, what was the question again? I forgot.
What did it feel like to take that leap?
Liberating. I was liberated. I was excited. I was scared, but I was really more excited than anything else. And I was super focused. I said it was like a checklist. Like, you all know that I love my checklist. I love to cross something off, and that had been on my to-do list for 13 years, and it felt so good to cross that out. I had three. I narrowed it down to 3 infertility specialists who took my insurance, and I decided to go with the one that I went with, because where my husband worked, this doctor was known as a quote unquote baby whisperer. And I was like, I need that guy. So that's how I made that decision. And it seemed like everything just kind of fell into place really quickly, because a lot of times when you make these appointments, any doctor appointment, you have to wait months to get in if you're a new patient. And they actually got me in like the next week because they had a random opening. So I got in like immediately. So it felt like it was like meant to be,
That is awesome. I remember when you started all of that, and you guys kind of started the whole journey, and then all of a sudden COVID hit. And then it was like, how did that affect your plans? Because I remember it definitely put it off. Like, you guys took a step back.
Oh, yeah. So it was about a month after I had quit my job. So about 3 weeks after my first appointment that the whole world shut down. But in that time, I had already run a bunch of tests and had chewed off my nails into the nail bed because I'm like, what are these blood tests going to say? Blah, blah, blah. And then it thankfully all came back normal. And then the world shut down. So it was very frustrating. And it was like, oh, well, that sounds about right. Here we go again. Now we have to wait again. Because, we're old hands at this, 13 years. What's another, who knows how long, right? But I was also kind of relieved, to be honest, because like I said before, it was comforting to have disappointment. Yeah. Yeah. Weird, right?
Oh, wow.
But for me, I'm very much like the devil, like as bad as the situation is, if I know it, I find comfort in that because I know it's going to be this bad. So, oh, yeah, well, disappointment again. Yep, that's about right. And a part of me really didn't want to find out if something was really, truly wrong with one of us. Like, are we going to die? Do I have cancer? Does he have cancer? Like, what is going on? And now we kind of had an excuse to not explore it and just live in the moment. So there was kind of relief there. And I know it's weird, but that's how I felt.
Wow. That's just like so fascinating though. Like, I mean, I could see that. You could have all kinds of
weird, right?
emotions going through something like that. Yeah. I mean, did you ever feel like the time was slipping away though? And like, maybe this would never happen then for you? Or did you still have hope for maybe one day?
I still had hope for one day, and I think it's kind of blind hope, but it was there. And whether it was put in my head or my heart for whatever reason, I hung on to it like I was hanging off the side of a building. So that hope was what made me really, I guess, keep going. Because as small as it was, and even though our time frame was getting smaller and smaller, and we didn't know, none of us knew how COVID was going to affect us to the extent that it did. I just hung on and muddled through just like everyone else did at that time.
Yeah, I remember all of this too. And so you guys kind of, it was a long process till you finally got to that point of the IVF like cycle itself. So let's just talk about how did that go? Egg retrieval, fertilization, like all of it from like start to finish. Just explain it because there's people who have no clue. There's people who are going through it right now and they can totally relate. And let's talk about it.
Okay. So the first thing that happens, and all of you, please bear with me. Like I said, I'm reliving this for the first time, and new things come back into my head every single day. It's kind of like I had blinders on, like when you're going through a really like a tough time, like at work, and you only have blinders on and you don't see anything else. And then it's like in retrospect, oh, these little memories start coming back. That's what it's like for me. So I expect this whole journey of reliving my journey to be ever evolving, probably for the rest of my life, because I'm pretty sure I blocked out a lot of it subconsciously or consciously. Yeah. I don't really know. But IVF, the whole process starts with testing. So they go from least invasive to most invasive. And what they start with is asking a bunch of medical questions. Like, what is your family? What is your personal history? Have you ever had surgeries? Have you ever been in a motor vehicle accident? The typical things that you get at a doctor's office. And then they talk about your family history. And then they talk about your sexual history. And then they talk about even what you do with your partner now. So yeah, they do, because are you having sex enough? Honestly, that is a full on question that they ask you. Are you having adequate sex? And
what? Because it's like the most basic question, right?
Yeah, but it takes you aback at first. Like the first time I heard it, I was like, what? And then you think about it, go, at first I was like, oh, that's none of your business. And I'm thinking, yeah, it is, because they need to know, are we even trying? Are you even doing it the right way? Okay, because maybe we need to start back at that. So, it's nothing is sacred anymore. Then we do blood work, basic blood work. We look for your vaccine history. What are you immune to? You also look at things like your STDs. After all those come back as normal or whatever else you find, because those are easy to fix, right? Or easy to isolate. If there is a disease or something like that they can fix with an antibiotic, great, wonderful. That's wonderful. We like that. We're going to stop there, right? Before we go more invasive. After the blood work, we do visualizing, so ultrasounds. And let me tell you, ultrasounds are not fun. I didn't know that. For someone like me, I do research into everything. I did not properly research what a transvaginal ultrasound was. And it is a rude awakening.
Very weird.
So please do your research before you go for one. Mm-hmm. Because it's not external, it's an internal probe.
Yeah.
And then we do a pap smear to make sure everything looks good. Make sure there's no polyps. They do a basic like GYN exam, like a basic visualization, make sure there are no polyps or anything like that, or make sure that your cervix is okay. So, okay, all that came out good. And then we go into the cutting. We go into the actual biopsies, and it's like ultrasound guided biopsies. And going back to the ultrasounds, they also look at your ovaries, make sure you have ovaries, make sure your basic structures are there, because, if those aren't, then there's really no point going through some parts of the IVF. There are other things to address at that point. And fortunately for me, everything came back perfectly fine. But at the same time, you're like, oh, nuts. What is going on? What if there is nothing wrong and you can't address it? If there's something wrong, you can try to fix it or say, okay, we'll reroute around that. But if everything is normal, what are you going to fix? And then we went into the biopsies, and that's when they do, they manipulate your cycle. They try to time it to your monthly cycle because they want to get an endometrium or your uterine lining biopsy to see if there's anything wrong. Disease. Do you have enough blood vessels there? What is the architecture of it? Because if an embryo can't implant, you can't implant. We have to fix that. So that's how it starts. And we were delayed 8 times. I went back. I have a giant folder. It's called my IVF folder, and I counted it up. I was delayed 8 times.
Jeez. What was the delay for? Because of your cycle, or because of the doctor, or what?
All of the above, honestly. Cycle timing was really hard. I don't know why, because I am regular, but for some reason we just couldn't catch the right time. I thought I knew how to calculate my cycle. Apparently I didn't. So that was a big problem for us. We couldn't catch the ovulation. We couldn't catch the shedding at the right time, the shedding of the lining at the right time. Also, it was mistakes made by the office and by the lab. There was also COVID. So it was a whole gamut of things, including when mistakes were made on the doctor side and on the testing side. It was because they forgot to run tests. They literally forgot to run certain tests, which in the end worked out well. But at the time, it was very frustrating.
Yeah. So then the world shut down after all that, right? Like you finally got all of that
Mm-hmm.
worked out?
Well, I got the blood work worked out. That's it.
Okay. And then what was supposed to be the next step? How long did you have to wait to continue because of that?
So in the 3 weeks from when I had left my job, all my blood work, my vaccine history, my STD, my blood type, all the medical history stuff on both of our sides, my husband and myself, totally clear. So we got through the first step. And then the world shut down. It was COVID. And I waited about 10 to 12 months because my husband it was a frontline COVID worker. We lived in a rural area. A lot of them did not have proper PPE, personal protective equipment. He saw patients without masks and without gloves oftentimes because we, as a society, we ran out of this stuff. And everyone tried to scramble to get it, but he was frontline. So we said, okay, we don't know how COVID affected us to begin with when this whole thing started. How is it going to affect a pregnancy? What if he brings it home and I'm pregnant? So we stopped because also the office shut down because they had to navigate how to protect their staff and patients from COVID. And then my mom towards the end of 2020, my mom was re-diagnosed with cancer. After nearly 4 years in remission, her cancer came back. So I flew home back to the East Coast in New York to help take care of my parents. So I left my husband back in Arizona for 3 months. I quarantined with my sister, who was also a frontline COVID worker. And that's because she got COVID and she got over it. So the only safe place for me to go at the time, and hotels were booked with frontline workers all over the place. So I couldn't even get a hotel room. I stayed with my sister, quarantined there. And then I spent 3 months with my parents, helping them navigate getting my mom chemo treatment. In February of 2021, we restarted the whole process again. We then jumped right back into where we should have left off. After all the easy tests were run, we started with the ultrasound imaging, the pap test, and the biopsies.
So you kind of had to do it all over again.
No, we didn't do the blood test all over again because nothing had changed for us. We didn't,
Okay.
So we just went back in and we went straight into, okay, the next step 2 is imaging. So we made sure that that I had ovaries, that they were structurally sound, that they didn't have any cysts or anything like that the fallopian tubes were patent, that the architecture and the structure of my uterus was within normal limits. And so all this had to be done around the timing of my period. So the imaging of the ovaries had to be done right after I finished my cycle, because that's when you start ovulating. So that's when they wanted to see if I have any cysts that needed to be addressed on my ovaries, because that's when they're most prominent, because when you're getting ready to ovulate, and whether I was actually, if they could see if there were any eggs like on the surface kind of getting ready to be released. Like, am I going through early menopause? We weren't really sure. Do they think I have enough eggs? We don't really know. So we had to time the imaging to my cycle, which again was kind of a hiccup because I didn't know how to time my cycle well. So that was a learning experience.
That is a learning
Yay.
experience. I didn't know that for the longest time either. That's hard. That's hard to figure out.
It is, because I thought it was like, oh, I just count, and I had like the textbook 28-day cycle. Therefore, it should come on this day. No, it did not. There are anomalies, and mine, let me tell you, it was an anomaly. And then the biopsies definitely had to be timed with the cycle. So what they did was that they also put me on oral contraceptives. They put me on the pill because they wanted to make sure I didn't get my period before they took a sample. That was part of the process too. I didn't realize when I first started this, I would be on medications already, even before we started talking about egg retrieval, that I would be put on medicines. So that was a shock.
Wow. Yeah, that's a lot to your body too. For how long did you have to take basically medication during this process?
So we tried to limit it to 1 month at a time. They would image when they needed to, and then they would put me on the pill to prevent the shedding. And that way, at the end of the month or at this point when I had the thickest lining, that they could do a biopsy. So I was on the pill for
Okay.
honestly a long time because again, I couldn't time it properly. So that was a while. I can't remember how long I was on it for. I feel like I was on it for months. So it's kind of hard. I can't really remember that part yet.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll come to you one day. So the biopsy, was that like a surgery? Did Yeah, that did they have to like put you under and go in there and like cut out like part of your, I don't know, like what was that process? The biopsy, what was that like? That's what I imagine anyways when I think of it, but it could be completely wrong.
Yeah. Well, so I didn't know either. So what they wanted to do was they wanted to take a piece of my endometrium, which is the lining to your uterus, which is what the embryo attaches to and grows. That's where the nutrients comes from. That's where they develop the attachment with through their umbilical cord, all that stuff. So they needed to know that my endometrium was healthy. So when you go in, they first of all, they put me on a protocol to try to get my lining as good as it could. So they said, okay, in the beginning, just take your oral contraceptives and come in at the end of towards the end of the month at this date and we'll take a biopsy. So I did. I went in, they put you in a gown and it's just like an OB exam. You get reclined back with your feet up in stirrups and they do a general OB exam and they use a speculum. And then they use the probe, which is the transvaginal ultrasound, through your vagina to kind of see how thick it is. They also have a wand on top of your belly too, so that they can kind of sandwich the endometrium between the two wands to see how thick it is. And mine was very spotty. They moved the wands around a lot, trying to image all of the lining of the entire uterus, and they couldn't get a very good biopsy. The biopsy is like a scrape, basically. They use like a little curette type of thing, and they take a little sample of it, and they put it in a jar, a formalin, and they send it off. Ideally, your endometrium is 8 millimeters thick. Mine was 3 millimeters and very spotty. Some areas had no lining whatsoever, and other places was 3 or 4, but nowhere near 8. So when we got done with that, it was not a very positive doctor when he was done. He was like, I don't really know if this is enough. And he scraped several areas. It wasn't just one like he would do normally with other patients. He had to take it from several different areas. So what they wanted to do was run a test for endometriosis, and they wanted to run an endometrium receptivity array, which is an ERA. And that's a test that tells the health of my lining, including like the pattern of blood vessels and what is my ideal implantation window. Like they can actually tell me this is when you should go implant to get the best results, which I thought was crazy that you could do that. The ERA was the first test I had to pay for out of pocket. Everything else was paid for by my insurance in full. And normally the ERA is not a test that's recommended for first-time IVF patients, but my doctor was literally throwing the kitchen sink at us because of my maternal age. He wanted to really be aggressive with us and try to save time, so we did it. And then the results came back, and it was inconclusive because the sample was too small, and he didn't run the endometriosis test that we had discussed.
What? No. And like how much did that
Yeah.
test cost?
Oh God, that test cost me out of pocket $300, I think, $350 at the time.
What? Were you furious with him? What? Why didn't he? What? Why did he do that?
He blamed the techs, not his techs, but the lab techs. But what was I supposed to do? Yes, I was angry, and now I have to do this again. I was very upset. Because, like I said,
no
I
kidding.
hate the ultrasound. The ultrasound is so uncomfortable.
It's so invasive.
It is. And it's so embarrassing, so invasive, so embarrassing because no one likes being in that position. Literally that position.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So after that, how many times did you have to do that? And then what happened next?
So what we did next was we jumped right into egg retrieval. I would normally wait and do another endometrium biopsy, but that's just going to be another month wasted, and you don't have a month. So let's just jump right into egg retrieval. And at the end of the egg retrieval process, you come back, and the week that you're supposed to be implanted with your embryo, we're going to do another endometrium biopsy instead. He goes, because I'm not going to implant an embryo if we don't know whether you have endometriosis or not, or whether we can even get a good endometrium lining in you, because that's just a waste. Because at that point, if I do have endometriosis and they couldn't get a good lining for me after a bunch of treatments, then I'd have to look into a surrogate, right? But at least I still save my embryos. So that's what he was thinking. So we jumped straight into the egg retrieval.
Okay. And then what happened? What happened with that? How many did you get?
We got 11 eggs. So that was good. That, especially for my age, they were really impressed by that. So I got a lot, but this is, so, you know, when you talk about like IVF, all those pictures of those injections and like feeling miserable and timing and the shots into the belly, you know, that's what everyone thinks of in IVF. That's what I was going into now. And it was summertime in Arizona, so really hot, and everything had to be refrigerated. And because I have this certain insurance, I think I had Blue Cross Blue Shield at the time. I had to go with a certain specialty pharmacy instead of what the doctor normally uses. We had to coordinate delivery from another pharmacy in Phoenix and have it delivered to me. No, it came from Montana to Phoenix, then Phoenix to me. Because that's what my insurance would cover, at least part of it. Otherwise, I'd be paying for it all out of pocket. So I restarted the process in February, and now it's summertime. So that's how long it took for me to get to this point, because we had so many hiccups.
Wow.
And I remember the day that I received the medicine, and that's the day I was supposed to take it at a specific time. I was receiving a bunch of phone calls from delivery saying, "Where are you? You need to be home to receive this." Because if I'm not there to receive it because it's so hot, they're afraid to leave it for delivery, and they would be liable then. And they don't want to be liable for something so expensive. So it was a stressful day. I remember I had to go out, and I scrapped all my plans and just said, I'm sitting home and getting this delivery. And tonight is my first dose. So it was not the best day that day.
So what was it like being on those meds? What did it feel like? Did it affect you?
Oh yeah, big time. So it's very specific in timing that I had to take it. I remember 5:03 p.m. was my first dose.
What?
And
wow.
Yeah, it's very specific. The office did the math, the dosing, and everything. And even though I have a strong medical background, they gave me this like stack of papers that's supposed to simplify everything of what the medicine is and what it's going to do and what to expect and how to take it. And it was overwhelming for me. I know how to give a shot. I know how to give myself a shot. And even I was nervous. And I got the medicine and I was like, okay, I'm going to be super prepared. It has to be brought to room temperature first. So I said, I'm going to start getting ready like half an hour before I have to give myself the medicine. And I only got it like 5:03. I was supposed to take it. I think I got it at 4:30 in the afternoon. That's when I received the delivery. And I opened the box and I read the instructions. And they said to inject this medicine. And it's a pre-dosed, it's in a syringe. It's pre-dosed. Wonderful. I don't have to pull anything. Great. Love that. But there were no needles. There were no needles and there were no syringes delivered. So I couldn't administer the medicine.
Oh no.
And I nearly cried. I was so tense. I nearly cried. My husband told me to take a deep breath and he drove me to the pharmacy and he goes, ask for insulin syringes and that's what you're going to use. So fortunately we knew what our resources were, but imagine like, I didn't know that. I didn't know, okay, this is what I use to administer it and this is where I get it. You would be totally foiled. And guess what? At 5:00, their office closes. So you can't call anyone. Or they'll call you back, but goodness. Then you miss your window at 5:03.
Yeah.
So, and if you miss this, then you have to wait another month. It's, you're so losing time again. So it was, oh yeah, we floored it to the pharmacy and we floored it back. I'm so glad we were not pulled over that day because I think I would have gone berserk.
So then how long was it from that day till then when you got to the embryo stage, like where you finally moved? Like how long was that process, having to do that?
Oh, only 2 weeks. But it feels like
really?
It was a month, honestly. Yeah, it's only 2 weeks.
Oh, wow.
It's only 2 weeks of medicine. It's not that long. But it feels like forever because you're taking, I think, I remember taking 3 doses or maybe it's 4 doses in a day. I don't remember. I remember getting up in the middle of the night and then in the morning and then at 2 p.m. Oh, maybe it was 4 doses and then at night before bed. So maybe it was 4 doses. And your question before was, did it affect me? Yes, it affected me because I remember that. I don't know if you remember this, but you asked me to meet up with you and do things with you and stuff like that, with social distancing and everything like that with COVID going on. And I said, I can't do anything after 2:00. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And it's because I couldn't drive after 2 p.m. So I had to squeeze in all of my things, any errands, any driving I had to do had to be done before 2 p.m. because after my 2 p.m. dose of medicine, I would get so woozy and my depth perception would be so off that I would see a wall and still hit it. So I was too afraid to drive a car at that point. If I had to work, I would have lost my job.
Wow. That's incredible.
So yeah, I don't know if I ever explained to you why I had to be done before 2.
Oh.
I wasn't completely crazy, just a little crazy. Oh, and I also had mood swings. According to my husband, I had very bad mood swings. He said that he was walking on eggshells the whole time. But for me, I didn't think I was that bad. I actually thought I was handling it pretty well, but he was like, no, I had to walk on eggshells. And now, in retrospect, I believe it.
And he was preparing for when you're pregnant then. So it's all like part of the process, I guess.
It is. You're right. We're just embracing the whole process where he has to walk on eggshells for 9 months. He has to do it for 2 weeks.
Exactly.
Not everyone needs to do as much as I did. A lot of women just do shots. But for me, I had to do shots and an oral medicine, I think because of my maternal age. and like I said, he was throwing the kitchen sink at me to make me as prepared as possible. So it was constant medicines and timing. I set it on my phone. I had timers to go off 15 minutes before I give myself the medicine, and then 5 minutes to make sure I drew it up properly, and then another one to go off when I was supposed to give myself the medicine. Like, it was insane. I had to say, I was impressed with my efficiency of that, but still, it was bananas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is rigorous.
Yes, that's a good word.
And then what?
After the first week of medicine, they had me come back down for another ultrasound to see how the ovaries are developing. What they wanted to do is try to get me to ovulate more than one egg at once. So that's what all that medicine is for, is to try to get as many eggs as possible. So they looked on ultrasound to see if I had multiple, I guess, little bubbles of where my eggs were developing and getting ready to release, because that's where they would go and with a needle retrieve them one by one. And they said, okay, you're doing well, go home, continue your medicines for another week, and then come back. So I did. And when I went back, it was, again, you're reclined in a OBGYN exam position, your feet up in stirrups, and they use ultrasound again. And I learned a very important thing about this whole process, about my anatomy. I know precisely where my left ovary is, believe it or not. They have a really hard time imaging it. I know this is weird and I know this is really private, but you know what? I'm bearing it all today. They had a really hard time seeing my left ovary. So they did a lot of digging, and it turns out it's actually really far back. And they thought that I actually didn't have a left ovary for a long time, because it's so far back. Like, I could put my thumb on my lower back and that is where my left ovary is, because that's how many times they had to image it.
Wow.
So what they did is did they put me out for that? I'm trying to remember if they put me out for that. I don't remember if they put me out for that. Like, you think I would know that, right? I should have thought about that. But
yeah, well, maybe you just don't remember because you were out. Maybe that's why.
Or so addled on all my hormones.
We'll blame it on the hormones.
It's the hormones. Yeah. So what they do is then they go through your cervix. They go through with a very fine needle, and they go to each little ovary and each little, not cyst, but every little pocket, and they retrieve one little egg. Yes, I was put out for it, because I remember waking up in recovery for that. And they suck out every little egg that they could find. They had a really hard time again with my left side. They were not able to retrieve any on the left side because it was too hard to get to. No, they retrieved two. They retrieved two from my left side. All of them came from my right side. So even though they saw that I had a lot of eggs on my left side, they couldn't get it. And they just said, okay, we're done. We've been in here for, I think he said over an hour trying to get those eggs. And he said, we're done. And they woke me up and said, hey, we have 11 eggs and we're going to fertilize them tonight. And we'll let you know how it goes in about 5 days.
Wow.
Yeah.
5 days. And
5 days.
Okay. So then they fertilize all of them?
They do. They fertilize all of them. So I forgot to tell you. So this was all from my point of view, but my husband also had to provide a sperm sample, and he did that a while ago. So they also ran tests on his sample to make sure that the motility of the sperm was good, that the health of the sperm was good, and everything came back great, which is wonderful. Mm-hmm. But little hiccup. There's a process, and it's like extra spinning for low motile sperm. So there are some men who create sperm that have low motility. They're kind of lethargic. So what they do is that they centrifuge it to kind of wake them up, and it kind of gets them going a little bit more. But for some men who have a certain shape in their sperm, it's not a good idea. They're really healthy, but it's not recommended. The problem is that COVID was going on, And we all know that COVID lives in bodily fluids, including seminal fluid. So in order to protect the staff and other specimens in their lab, they realized that they had to deep freeze all samples to make sure that COVID doesn't get spread. So they had to freeze my husband's sample and then defrost it and then centrifuge it. And for his sample, that wasn't the best plan because it actually can cause more damage to his samples because of the shape of the sperm. So we had to let them do it because otherwise they wouldn't take us on as patients. So they froze it, they defrosted it, they made sure there's no COVID, they spun it down, and that night they tried to fertilize all 11 eggs. And in the end, after 5 days, they called me and they said, you have 7 fertilized, which is a great number. We were really happy with that. 7 out of 11, we were so excited. And we wanted to give every embryo the best chance that we could. So we decided to do genetic testing. So we submitted all 7 embryos to genetic testing. And what they do is they take a little fine needle, they take a little tiny sample from each embryo, and they run a genetic test. They're looking for things like genetic diseases, Down syndrome, what the gender of the embryo is, boy or girl. So they can tell you a lot. And that took about 2 weeks. And I was checking the portal obsessively. They tell you, they track your specimen the whole time. You could see it going through all the processes and everything. And of course, I was checking it every hour because I wanted to know. And the results came in, and out of the 7, I only had 1 viable one.
Wow.
Yeah.
1.
I was disappointed.
How did they determine like that one was viable and the others weren't?
So they looked at, first of all, we had all girls. So that's bananas. We did not think that. We thought there would be more boys than girls because in his family they only make boys, but I only had girls. So we love that. But what they did was they looked at the translocations. They looked at their gene specificity, and just like Down syndrome, there's a certain transposition of genes. They could tell that it wasn't viable. I had 7, 1. So I think half of them, I think 3 of them would have been early miscarriages. And then I had 3 that would have been late miscarriages. So by late, they mean like in your second trimester. So, you get through your first trimester, and you kind of breathe a sigh of relief. And that's when I would lose those.
Awful. So what do they do with those ones?
So they asked me after they coached me, and I spoke to a genetic counselor too. I spoke to my IVF specialist. I spoke to 2 geneticists from that lab, 1 male and 1 female, and to give like unbiased accounts to make sure that I make the best decisions going forward. And I thought about it, and they asked me, what do you want to do with the non-viable ones? You had 3 choices. You can hold on to them and try to implant and give them a chance. You can donate it to science and let them study embryology, or you can have them destroyed. And I had them destroyed.
Was that a hard decision to make?
It was.
What was that like, making that decision?
When I looked at the choices, my gut just went to the last option, which was to just let them go. Because I don't know why, it was just a gut reaction. I understand that they're embryos, and whether there's life or not, that whatever you decide, that's up to you. But for me, it was just a gut reaction. I needed to know in my heart that it was all at peace. And I know that's very personal and very, very controversial, but that was my choice with my husband.
I mean, it would be harder not knowing what was going on with them. You know what I mean? I feel like that would be harder almost.
Yeah. That's what I think. You know, I studied in a lab. I know what goes on in a lab, and it's not science fiction. It is science. And I appreciate what we learn from other people's samples. But for me, I couldn't do it.
Yeah. So knowing that there was only one chance, like, how was that emotionally? What was that like?
Oh, I bawled. At that point, I lost hope. I said, what are the chances? And I looked it up. Of course, I looked it up because that's what I do. And they were like, oh, less than 20% chance, less than 30% chance. And I thought, oh gosh. And I was just so dejected. I was so depressed. And it wasn't until one of my really good friends said, Dee, it just takes one. And it just clicked. And I was like, you're right. It just takes one. And if this is the one it was meant to be, then it's meant to be. And at that point, I decided I am going to do everything I could to be as perfect as I could to make the best environment for this little girl. And then it's up to her. I went down a dark rabbit hole, but fortunately, my friends were there to pull me out of it.
Wow, that's incredible. And like, and it does only take one. You have one. I can't, it's like, it's so amazing. Even when it did, you went through the whole thing and here's your little baby and you did it once. And I know just from hearing things that some people have to do it like multiple times, like such a miracle. Mm-hmm. So amazing.
Yeah.
That's
so amazing.
Awesome.
I was so fortunate.
I'm so glad you didn't give up, through all of that.
Me too. And I mean, you were there. I have so many friends and families who were with me, even like I said, strangers, because I even told strangers, excuse me, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm doing IVF and my brain is all foggy. So if I literally hit you with my shopping cart, I am so sorry.
That's funny. I just want to take a moment to honor everything you've shared in this episode. From the years of the uncertainty, the decisions to finally pursue IVF, which is a big decision, to arriving at the one that's viable embryo, the one. This is more than a story. It's a testament to resilience, to faith, and to what it means to keep going, even when the odds are so heavy. So if you're listening and feeling this deep in your bones, you're not alone. Whether you're in the thick of your own journey or loving someone who is, we hope that this gives you something to hold on to. And in our next episode, we'll follow up with the rest of the journey, what it took to prepare for transfer, the obstacles that came up, and the moment everything changed. So stay tuned and listen to the next episode. And until then, make sure you subscribe to Pearls of Motherhood wherever you get your podcast. Visit our blog for more stories and resources and soon-to-be merch. And come find us on Instagram at Pomcasts, POMCASTS. We'd love to connect with you. And thanks for being here. We'll see you next time.